Um, Hi there. This is the Flux Dev Community Meeting for June 30th, 2022. And we've got a good group of folks with us. Here is in the notes, link to the meeting notes. Sorry, in the chat, link to the meeting notes. And just to be clear, we're all recording. So anyone who doesn't want to be recorded, act accordingly. Great. Okay, so we have some topics. Please list other topics down here, or feel free to add other topics if you want to cover them. The first one that we do every time, or the first two that we do every time. Number one is reviewing the current dev focus. Does someone here want to help guide us through the current dev focus? I can share my screen if it helps, or rather speak to it. Yeah.
I think I can quickly talk about that. If you can share the board on your screen, that would be brilliant. But overall, I don't think the focus changed much from the last session. We're still kind of going through some Git issues, so Sanskar was looking into that. I think there's one specific scenario that we still haven't got to the bottom of. But on top of that, on the Git front, we are pretty much starting on the Git implementation consolidation, consolidate Git implementations, which is the 166. So on that one, pretty much what we're doing is creating a package with Git, a Git package on the package repository, which would pretty much get all the code that we use to access Git repositories, and then we would be able to stop getting image automation controller depending on source controller, for example, and actually both of them would just go and use package Git directly. So that is one of the things. There is still some issues, as I mentioned before. We're still trying to kind of get to the bottom of that, in which, especially on EKS, image automation controller would just crash without any sort of information or logs. So we're still trying to kind of get to the bottom of that. It seems to be related to CGO when it's accessing libgit2, so something on C is not working well. On top of that, we still have the controllers rewrites, and I think that would be the core of it. On the items in progress, I saw that Santochi created an API already for improving the supply chain of the Golang with libgit2. So that is something that I'll have a look. But I think, yeah, that is almost ready to merge.
Sorry, Paolo, where is this? Is this in tied to a release, or I went to GA progress? Is that where?
Yes. If you go back to the GA, because GA progress is the ones that we kind of done already.
I got you. Yeah.
Sorry. So the first one is the improved supply chain security, which is, I think the only internal dependency we have that is not signed or doesn't have SBOM. So Santochi started on that. I think there is a PR attached to this already. Well, if you click on that link to pull request, yeah, I think it's the #28 on the right side.
What was this? Sorry. Oh, there we go.
It's not really clear, is it? Like, it's quite concealed.
Yeah. I like the new sliding drawer, but yeah, that wasn't very clear. But I got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is almost there. But I think that's pretty much that in terms of the key things from Jay that I can remember. Anyone else have any other things to that point?
I have some questions, if you can indulge me. So around Git, how we are going to do with tests. So I know we have a bunch of tests in source controller, different tests in image automation controller, And now we are creating this Git package. And I think we want to catch all issues before we release a new Git package version. That means we have not only to consolidate the code, but also take all the tests, source controller, which has tests only around cloning and discovering tags, branches, and so on. And so those, I don't know, in the first iteration could be just copied to package, but also all the push, create new branch, push new branch, all the things that image automation does, right? How is that?
Yeah, I definitely think that that is would be the way. And then as we go a level above from abstraction perspective. So when we go to the controllers, we can do a lot of the tests as unit tests with the interfaces, and not necessarily going to repositories and all. But we also would have that. But we definitely need at the package level have all the different permutations, all the issues that we faced with specific SaaS providers, all the kind of thing. I definitely think we need at the package level first. And then on the controllers, we would have a bit of that, but we would have more about the actual workflow rather than the Git implementation itself.
Yeah, I think what we should strive for is having all the operational tests in package, and in the controllers we should do conditional tests, like look at the conditions of a particular object and test that if that reflects the reality of what's going on, why it failed, how it failed, what revision, and so on. But the actual operations, I feel like they should be in package Git, and I'm guessing there we need to hook up Azure DevOps, right? So we can test against a real.
Yeah, that makes sense. All the major kind of SaaS providers, ideally we would test them. Yeah. Especially introducing regressions, and also we probably need that, the AWS one, the GCP one, and so on.
Is Sunny on this call?
Yeah.
Hey, Sunny. So I know you've worked a little bit around creating a testing framework for clouds with Terraform.
Right, that can be used for this. So if you want to create a Azure Git repository, Azure DevOps, you can use that to just pass the Terraform configurations and run your tests against them. So we already create like container registry using the same tooling. You can create Git repositories, you can create KMS, anything. And you can write common tests that runs against all the different providers. Only the Terraform code will change.
Nice. Yeah, so TF test, where is it right now?
It's an image refactor.
It's in the image refactor.
Internal test package.
Yeah, so we need to move this to package.
We can. It's just one file, I guess. Nothing much.
Yeah, but that adds all the Terraform things to package, right? We need to.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a way to, at least we have a plan on how to test against cloud vendors. Thank you, Sunny, for confirming that. Another question about package Git. Do we want to use package Git in the Flux CLI as well? So we have three components that are touching Git right now: source controller, of course, image automation controller, but also the CLI, which does a bunch of things, creates repos, probably does more than the controllers, because it also creates repos and so on. But for that, we have a dedicated package, a dedicated repo, which is called Go Git Providers. But besides dealing with the Git SAS API calls, it also does with cloning the repo on disk, committing files to it, changing the branch, and all of that.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to use the same thing across the board, because then any issues first, we resolve them, and we also can start consolidating more and more. Because it would be a bit awkward if something worked on the CLI, but then it doesn't work on the source controller and vice versa. See what I mean?
So would it
Yeah,
make
but if you import the Git package, then you also import libgit2 into the CLI.
Yeah, which is always the contentious point, isn't it? Yeah, let me think about that, especially on the libgit2, because in theory, what we could do is the libgit2 is like a sub package or something that is not necessarily required, because then you would use the same abstractions. The only difference would be that you would use GoGit instead. But yeah, let me think about that. So there might be a few easy ways to go around that, especially now with managed transport. We might be able to go around that.
Yeah, I think we discussed this before. The end goal will be, I don't know how many months from now, but the end goal will be to get rid of the unmanaged transport and then being able to statically link and build the Flux CLI against libgit2, and that should hopefully work on Windows and Mac, not only Linux.
Yeah, so that should work in both, but it's working now, the managed transport on Mac at least. So we might just need to check that on Windows. But overall, I can't see any challenge on that, apart from having to do all the things that we do on source controller and image automation controller about, like if you're trying to debug or something like that, you need like some specific ways around it, because otherwise that dependency won't be materialized. But again, I don't think that is a difficult technical challenge to surpass.
Okay, so on this PR with consolidating Git packages, we need to get all the tests from both controllers in there before we can merge this, right?
Yeah, or we can take that in parts as well, as we start bringing things up.
I had a chat with Sansker today, and he's planning to add more to the PR after we merge this to keep things in like understandable chunks of work, because the current PR is already like 4,000 lines of code. And I think that to consolidate the test cases, you will need to have a proper look at the test cases of both sides and see where they overlap, because I can think that even if there is only full coverage on the source controller side, but push coverage on the image automation controller side, the image automation controller will still have some tests for around pools. So, sorry. So, one sec. So I would suggest that we just continue to iterate over the PR, review it as it is right now, and then do follow-ups to add more bits.
So Hide, you suggest to get what's currently in here into shape for merging, no more, without adding more tests to it, with the current tests, switch both controllers to it, keep all the tests in the controller so we make sure nothing breaks, and then slowly move the tests with TF test and everything to package, right?
No, I think Sanskar said to me this morning that he already has the libkit2 code, if I recall correctly, in a separate branch. He wants to file it as a separate PR, however, to keep things separated because the current chunk is adding go-git, if I recall correctly, and is already pretty verbose. My proposal would be to at least wait for the second PR. Then we have the stable base of libkit2 and go-git, which is sufficient to add it to both controllers, and then start looking at the test cases. But we aren't there yet. We just have to go git in the current PR that's open. So we need the other one as
it's only
well. And then
go-git, right?
yeah, Sanskar has it prepared, but he wants to file it as a separate thing to keep things kind of separate, which makes logical sense. So I suggest that we talk about it for next week with Sanskar when he is able to join the meeting, because he has most details.
Okay. Yeah, now I see that's only go-git here. So yeah, okay.
This made me think about if we are adding Terraform-based tests for Git. I was thinking about doing something similar for the registry test, and I had some discussions that maybe we need a new repository for registry code so that we can run Terraform tests separately. Putting all those in package repository didn't feel right because package repository is really simple.
This topic came up this morning as well, although in a different way. It was about running tests of a module. No, it's about making the package CI more intelligent and leveraging the GitHub capabilities around detecting changes to certain paths, because the whole way the package repository works is that it kind of it's basically a one makefile structured around the folder structure of the repository root. So it should be fairly simple to target or to only trigger certain make targets based on path changes GitHub provides to us. And that would allow us to only run, for example, Git test when things in the Git folder change, or a combination of Git and API tests if both folders change. But that's separate from your thing, Sunny. I think your concern is that by creating this huge testing library almost, it becomes too advanced and complex to be put into this very simple package repository, which has like this, this, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, so we can have a TF test repo that contains a GitHub action, or publishes a GitHub action, whatever, as a container on GCR. Then we can use that in the CI workflows in package and all the other controllers. Would that be possible, Sunny?
I was thinking to keep the tests and the packages together so that you can fix them if things break. But maybe you can keep the tests separate in a separate repo pointed to a repositories branch and run those tests. Even that would be fine.
Wait, you want to keep the test framework and all the tests?
No. So framework is just one file. I'm talking about the Terraform configurations of a specific like registry test or Git related test together with the Git package or registry package.
Oh yeah. I see this exposed as a GitHub action, where in the GitHub action parameters you'll say, I want AKS with DevOps, I want GCP with KMS, I want, right? And once you run the GitHub action, it gives you all of those things. Then you can run your normal Go end-to-end tests targeting that infrastructure. So creating all those things will be in the TF test repo. And the controllers and package will have Go tests that take from, I don't know, environment variable or something like that, the information on how to connect to, I don't know, all these cloud things.
I think that doesn't provide the users of the utility library with sufficient needs to kind of structure their weird requirements for testing KMS or something else, because depending on what you're testing as a controller, there may be a requirement to kind of, I don't know, if you're testing the customized controller, you may need to set up proprietary KMS solutions against AWS to be able to test that part. While the source controller, for example, doesn't have those needs. So the configuration
Yes.
bit will always be, oh, you mean injecting the configuration into
the action. So like you do for Docker build, like you have the action Docker.
Yeah, okay,
build.
I misunderstood you. I thought the action had like a pre-defined environment, and then you would say like, oh, I want an AWS environment, and it would, okay.
No,
Okay, yeah, that
so
could work.
In the GitHub action, you have arguments, parameters, and in there, in the parameters, you'll specify KMS with these keys, with whatever, I don't know, OCI with this type of registry, with these images, and that will run, it will create the whole infrastructure, it will block the workflow until everything is ready, and then it will export some values like tokens, URLs, what you need then in your Go tests to actually target that infrastructure. Right now it's free environment variables, right, Sunny?
That's exactly what we do. So it exposes those things through the Terraform state object. And then you put them into a global variable and your test query those values like registry name URL from that global value.
Okay, so it's already made like that. We just need to wrap it in a GitHub action so we can reuse it everywhere.
Can be done, right? I was also thinking about publishing some Terraform modules, because different repositories will need some similar Kubernetes environment, like source controller or image reflector. So we can have a module for creating AKS cluster or GKE cluster, and we can centrally keep the module, and individual repositories can just import and use that Terraform code. They don't have to modify their Terraform code, so it reduces fragmentation.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah.
So should that be in a separate repository? Should it be part of package?
No, I think the Terraform things should be in its own repo and expose them as a GitHub action for everything else. You configure what you need in the GitHub action parameters, then the action exposes environment variables down to the other actions so they can access, I don't know, the GKE cluster, the KMS, or whatever. GitHub action has a way to write to the runner environment. So we can use that to pass all the creative things down below.
I'll think more about that. I think this is good. Yeah.
Cool. So I just wanted to check in about this. This is super productive. We're talking about, was it the get overall improvements, overarching issue, and my only question is, right now with the other topics on the board, are there any topic, we have a half an hour left, just a good amount of time. Are there any, do we need to sort of say anything about this to kind of wrap up this discussion, or do we want to like pinpoint which items on this agenda we want to get to? I'm just trying to be helpful as the host. I think it's really up to the team. I mean, I could say, okay, cool. It sounds like we've talked it out, but I'm just wondering, do we need any kind of follow-up from this, or do y'all think we should spend some more time on this one for now?
So the follow-up is next week to talk about the Git package again with Sanskar, which works on it, because now he's a man in the middle between us and Sanskar. So it's better for Sanskar to be here and say what how the refactoring advances, right? So next week, let's talk with Sanskar about that, and that's it.
Okay, cool. I just added that. Actually, Okay, so this was kind of the current dev focus. Basically, are there any other blockers or do people need help? There are something like 10 other items on here, but I don't know if we need to get through all of them.
So I have a blocker on the OCI part.
Yeah.
Around the RFC. There is some discussion around the URL field. So we need to settle down on that. What I've proposed yesterday was to follow Helm and enforce OCI as a prefix for the URL part. I mean, it's the comments there are saying, hey, you have URL Redis because Docker does this magic where it does docker.io/Redis, but it's still not HTTP something docker.io, right? So why is it called a URL? Because it doesn't look like a URL. And how Helm did that, even if OCI is not in YANA or is not a standard, it's has been proposed to be a protocol standard. It's not there yet. We could one solution would be stick with the URL field and force OCI as the prefix. Another proposal is Sunny and someone from Tanzu, I don't remember, commented, was to replace URL with repository. But to me, that sounds wrong because it's verbose. The kind is OCI repository. Why it should have .spec.repository? It
Or
should
image.
be name. But name then confuses users with the metadata name. So, yeah.
Another option was image field.
Oh,
So if you
image,
do
yeah, but we are
image-
not dealing with container
Right,
images.
right. Yeah.
It's an artifact, it's just a tarball, it's not an image. You cannot run it, it doesn't have a base OS. So it's image in image reflector controller because there we actually look for app images, which was back then the only way to do it. But that no longer applies to today's reality.
I think the OCI scheme is a good compromise.
Yeah, so we cannot decide it here. Please comment on the RFC. I don't know. Comment there your preference, and we have to take a decision in the RFC pull request. But this is something I want to, bring on as a blocker. No other comments there are blocking the RFC work. It's just that one, and naming is hard. Once we settle on something, being a V1 beta 2 API, we cannot change it later on. So it's quite important.
Are there any downsides to using the OCI : / prefix, URI prefix?
The downside is OCI : / is not yet standard. So
Yeah.
and to some people it may feel odd.
Yeah.
But we are already doing it for Helm repository custom resource. So maybe it's not that.
On that specific point, so if the endpoint is HTTP, would we also have a insecure field then that would be associated with that to then decide if that becomes HTTP or HTTPS?
So we already solved this for the bucket custom resource. And I think we should use that field there and put it everywhere. Because on the bucket resource, if I remember correctly, let me look it up again, you can specify as a field there in the custom resource, yes, I want to use an insecure endpoint, which is HTTP.
Yeah.
One second.
And we can do that. Yeah, I was looking at it. With the OCS scheme, what Helm is doing, and in fact, it's just then it's checking whether you have put the insecure field or not, and if you have it, it's using HTTP to carry the request, or otherwise, if you don't have it, it uses HTTPS.
Yes, yes. So it's spec.unsecure, which defaults to false, and you have to set it to true in order to connect to anything that's not TLS. So I don't know, maybe we should take this field and put it everywhere. It's an alternative to what you have proposed, Paulo, where you want to have this as a flag in the controller. It's
Yeah, I think it might be two separate things because, like, for example, well, I think that's a discussion for maybe another point. I'll put that as an agenda item, and if we get to that, we discuss that.
Okay, great. What about round of what's happening on the way to GA?
on the
On the way to GA, there's also an item that we try to cover, at least in brief.
Yeah, I thought we were going to merge those two into one because we kind of went through that as we were talking about the current development focus and all.
So the development focus right now matches the GA focus. Like what we are currently working on are 99% marked as for GA, especially the features like OCI and Helm OCI. Those are labeled as GA, and also the refactoring. So it's quite the same topic. We don't work on things outside GA. Like we haven't started working on features which we don't consider part of GA, and some features are highly requested, like I don't know, manual gating for all the things that Flux does. There are other topics which are desired by users, voted, and so on, but we have put a hold on all of those.
Okay, so why don't we, that makes sense. Why don't we take out this round of what's happening on the way to GA from our template? Since that is the priority of the dev focus, that makes sense.
Yeah, and rename the dev focus to GA dev focus or whatever, so people don't think we just dropped GA. If someone only looks at the doc and doesn't view the videos.
Makes sense. Also, I know Daniel's not here. Is there anyone that can speak to the docs update? Oh, and also before then, could someone take over for me for 1 second so I can run down and grab a package? I'll be back in 1 minute. Thanks.
No worries. Yeah, on the docs, yeah, anyone knows anything about that? I remember that the item we created on the backlog, let me just open that on my side here. So the documentation that we had there was like cloud-specific guides. So the only thing that is outstanding for that is storage for Azure, which we tagged there to, what is his name again? Well, actually, it's a bit split. So there is some for the SaaS, which is what SunTouch is working on, but there is two around managed identity and workload identity, but that I don't think we progressed. Anything else about documentation folks want to talk about?
No, I think once we get to the refactoring bits, all the controller docs will look way better. I went ahead and changed a little bit the customization API doc. So I removed all the Golang types from there and gave an example like source controller, like we have for source controller. But it's still not rewritten the whole thing as source controller is, and we should be doing that for all the other controllers when they are refactored. So it's still to do.
Yeah, the last point is, I think, well, one of the documentations around that you commented about created a PR to add the password protected SSH keys. So we had that in the documentation for like older versions. And I think your comments actually relate to how it was before. Just wanted to know if anyone knows why that didn't make to the latest version of the source controller. Well, I'll just pick it up from the previous one and deal with your comments on that PR. So we've agreed on that. Cool. So let's go to the next agenda item, which is.
Wait.
Yeah, sorry.
They saying we never had password protected SSH keys.
That was there before. So if we go to
we never had it in Flux 1, not in Flux 2. In Flux 2, always we supported the password field. Oh, I'm confusing with Bootstrap. So with Flux Bootstrap Git, we do support password protected.
Yeah, and source controller has that. So if you set that as a password field, that would be used later, at least on managed libgit, that is there for sure. Before
No, we have this in Flux 2 since the beginning because it was one of the things that we wanted to add. I'm guessing Hide forgot about it. But we should support a password field. If we find the password field, we use it for the SSH key, right?
Yeah, so that's how we're doing that. Now I'll share the code here quickly on the managed libgit. Yeah, the only thing is that in the documentation, we don't have that right now. And I'm not sure if that works for GoGit because yeah, I haven't tried that on GoGit, but for libgit is there. But yeah, I will go through your comments. I will see what it was there before, because I think before it was leveraging the Flux CLI commands to create the secret as well. And yeah, we can discuss that on the PR. But
yeah, it feels strange if it's only in libgit 2.
It's not great, is it? But I'm pretty sure that was there before.
Yeah.
The managed transport. The only thing is that that piece of code came from another place. But yeah, we'll get to it.
Okay.
I think the next point is yours, Scott, on the Helm SDK.
Yes, this is more of a general thing because this is a recorded meeting. It's more. I know I had mentioned it to a few folks otherwise, but you know, both Flux and Helm are using fuzzing as well as a number of other CNCF projects, and some of the items that the fuzzer is catching in Flux relate to some things in Helm, you know, because Flux, the Helm controller is using the the Flux Helm controller is using Helm's SDK. So part of one of the ideas is, hey, listen, could we maybe set up an informal chat just to look through some of these items? This would, I hope, include you too, Paulo, and ideally, I think would include Hida. I think Stefan mentioned this the other day, if I remember correctly, and I agree. That Hida, you've done, just a tremendous amount of work and you're currently refactoring the Flux Helm controller. So if we could do a little bit of that, then we could maybe knock out some of these items and at least identify, perhaps help together identify how it affects both projects. The ask
Scott,
was
may I
because,
stop?
oh, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
I changed to my iPhone and now I have a working microphone again.
Yes.
I missed the part in where I became relevant.
Yeah.
In like what's expected from me.
Would you be willing to join a chat with Paolo and perhaps some other Flux maintainers, maybe, and maybe not, depending on schedules, with the fuzzing team and another person and myself from the Helm team too, so that we can look at some of the issues that the fuzzer is identifying. And one of the things about the Helm project is that the SDK, how it's used by the CLI is one thing, right? But then how it's meant to be able to be used by other things that are not command line related is another. And we are.
My experience indeed with Helm is that if you use it as an SDK, then a lot of the protection that's available in the CLI layer that kind of protects a normal user from not doing things that the SDK isn't capable of doing. It's basically wiped out as soon as you go to like one level below, because there the coverage on SDK things is pretty small. Yeah, I'm happy to join such a meeting. I saw on the fuzzer, we get an email for all the fuzzer things. Most are build issues for which we can't do anything. But I indeed saw a comment from someone about it being a known Helm issue. I would just like to save myself some time if kind of a document could be drafted before the meeting so that I can have a quick 30-minute read through the things.
Yes. Thanks. I'll make sure to do that.
I noticed that with your merge of the OCI PR thing, or the caching thing, there seems to be a change, at least among you as a Helm maintainer, against or on how PRs changing Helm's SDK behavior are perceived. Is it correct to say that Helm is these days more open to PRs that improve the SDK experience as long as they're backwards compatible?
Correct. Not only looking into it, that's one of the reasons that that's one of the reasons that I'm focusing on the Helm project too now, and not just and in addition to the other parts of the Helm project that I was doing before. Like basically when I first mentioned or said, hey, I wanted to nominate myself for this, I specifically focused on saying, hey, I want to focus on the SDK user experience primarily.
That's really great. Okay. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. But yeah, good question, Hida, and also because this was identified as a bug, this specific behavior was changeable. If it was extraordinarily strict, like if it wasn't identified as a bug and just as a feature, we could have added a flag, you know what I mean, to opt out of caching. But it was identified as a kind of a principle of least astonishment for anyone that would be using the SDK to like not have caching on by default.
I think I will reach out to you offline after the meeting, because I have some questions about certain things Helm actions do, and if they are intended or if they're just due to repeated historical changes by people who have been contributing to the project without any context. Because, well, I will get you the details offline.
So that sounds good.
Thanks, Scott.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And also thanks to Hida for helping with that. Thanks to Stefan for talking with Sule about that and looking at that with them. And also thanks to Sule for making that fix. So what I'm hoping is that we can really have more contributors, however we're collaborating, but have more folks from our side also contribute to the upstream projects. And whatever I can do to unblock that, I will.
Yes, that was a quick fix by Sule. Thank you. We got caught by Helm defaults, and it could have been potentially very bad for Flux, but based on our test, the cache doesn't work as intended. So let's say a tenant, if it doesn't set up authorization, but it adds another a dependency to a private repo that has no access to an OCI repo, the cache will not hit on that key. I cannot explain it by looking at the code. It should, but it doesn't. So that's a good thing for us.
Oh, wow. That's something maybe we could bring up when we follow up on this. Maybe we could, not maybe, we should probably bring that up to the ORS folks. And maybe we or someone else can help with a fix upstream in ORS if that's the case.
It's not ORS here. It's Helm who decided to cache in memory in a global object every single credential. So it's not an ORAS thing. It's pure Helm.
Okay, I'll look into. Okay, thanks. Oh, and sorry, before moving on to the other thing, Paolo, were you
Yes.
meeting to?
Yes. Yeah, it's a quick one, really. It's just to kind of talk about. So it's an issue I created on 2 repos today about creating a new flag, which would allow to block all the HTTP access or non-TLS access across the controller. And the main motivation for that is pretty much to be able to enforce that at control level. So imagine you set up the controller and then, maybe you have tenants, maybe you don't, but regardless, you want to make sure that, everything within that instance will not use, unencrypted channels. So that's pretty much that, really, to be able to set in one place instead of either having to lean on OPA or the mission controllers, or having to do that, in each one of the objects.
Yeah, so the current solution for multi-tenancy that we showcase is use a Kyverno policy that looks at Git repos, Helm repos, and so on at the URL. Oh, if it starts with HTTP instead of HTTPS, block it. But yeah, maybe we should have a flag that we advise people to set, especially for Flux multi-tenant lockdown, where all the controllers all of a sudden reject any HTTP traffic. And yeah, it's what are we going to do around the insecure thing, right? If let's say we take what's in the bucket API now and we add the spec insecure field to Git repos, OCI repos, and all the other things. Then we also have the flags. So I'm guessing if the flag denies unsecure connection, we should fail to reconcile all the custom resources which have unsecure true. We shouldn't even look at them if it has insecure true, but the cluster admin decided, oh, on this cluster, we don't allow unsecure traffic. We shouldn't bother reconciling anything. We just set the ready condition to false, say there insecure is denied by, I don't know, the cluster admin or whatever, have a good error message, something like that, right?
Yeah, I would concur with that. There's no point in wasting resources on something that is not bound to succeed. So it would make sense to do something like that and shortcut the whole process.
Now, this means, especially for Git and I think Helm a breaking change, because if people right now use, let's say, a Helm repository with HTTP, and I think that's possible without MTLS. If we add the insecure field to the custom resource and that defaults to false, the moment people upgrade, all their Helm releases will fail. Everything will fail.
And enabling it by default doesn't sound good, so does it?
Exactly. So the option is enable by default, which is, I don't do that. So yeah, maybe we should go first with adding the control flags, and give the
The option in a way.
cluster admin the responsibility, and then think about adding those to the APIs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Nevertheless, at some point we're going to break everyone that's using HTTP, no matter what we do today. So better do it now before GA.
100%. Cool. All right, that's brilliant. So that was it. My side.
Okay, well, I think that's it for our agenda. Are our action items pretty good? I guess I'll move my little note about drafting the document for HITA before the meeting to an action item. Yes, I wanted to clarify. Sorry, with you, Paolo. Were you also okay with joining that meeting about the fuzzer found issue?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I think that's it. Unless anyone has any burning desires, we are done. I'm not hearing any. So have a great time. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Catch you later. Have a nice one.
Bye.